Ethan, you animal. You actually spent 40,000 on livestream girls. My wife, Sophia, stormed towards me, not even giving me a chance to speak before her hand flashed out and slapped me across the face. The force of it stung, and a ringing silence filled the air, broken only by my daughter's startled gasp. My mind went blank. Just moments ago, I'd been happily returning home after picking Lily up from school, ready to help her with her bag and start dinner. Seeing Sophia walk in had even brought a flicker of warmth. She hadn't been home this early in ages. She'd been distant lately, ever since her childhood friend, Leo, had returned. Evenings had become solitary affairs, punctuated by Lily's innocent chatter and the quiet hum of the television. The last time Sophia had joined us for dinner had been Lily's birthday, a bittersweet occasion marked more by her absence in the preceding weeks than her fleeting presence that day. Snapping back to reality, my first instinct was to shield Lily. I scooped her into my arms, turning her away from the scene unfolding. Her small body trembled against mine. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. Sophia sneered, thrusting a phone screen in my face, a digital ledger illuminated against her furious expression. "Ethan, you absolute beast. $40,000 lavished on live streamers." Live streams? $40,000? This was absurd. I reached for the phone, wanting to decipher the chaotic figures swirling on the screen, but she snatched it back, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Trying to destroy the evidence, are we? Think again. Being married doesn't give you a free pass to drain our accounts. You're going to give me back every penny of that 40,000, Ethan. Every single penny." Her voice rose with each word, echoing the threats of divorce she'd thrown around like casual conversation whenever I'd inadvertently crossed her in the past. Each time, I'd swallowed my pride and placated her, the thought of losing her a constant, gnawing fear. I loved her, or at least, I loved the memory of who I thought she was. Divorce had always been the last thing I wanted. But $40,000 was no small sum. This accusation felt baseless, a cruel joke. I couldn't just confess to something I hadn't done. I gently guided Lily towards her room, whispering for her to stay inside. Turning back to Sophia, I shook my head, ready to deny the ludicrous accusation, but just then, Sophia's phone trilled with a familiar ringtone. Her entire demeanor transformed. The anger evaporated, replaced by a saccharine smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her voice, moments ago sharp and accusatory, softened into a honeyed purr. "Leo? Darling, what a surprise, calling so early." The voice on the other end was loud, booming even through the phone's speaker, easily audible in the tense silence of our home. "Did you get it?" Leo's voice drawled, laced with an unsettling arrogance. Sophia giggled, a forced, brittle sound. "Get what, darling?" "The 40,000 I spent tipping those livestream girls." The smile plastered on Sophia's face froze, the carefully constructed facade cracking. The corners of her mouth twitched downwards, her eyes flickered towards me for a fleeting second, a flicker of something unreadable, guilt, shame, or perhaps just annoyance at my presence. But in the next breath, the sugary sweetness returned, dripping from her words like honey. "Oh, that? Yes, darling, I saw it. It's quite a lot, isn't it?" She paused, then added, with a forced lightness, "But if it makes you happy, darling, then you should keep doing it. I'll always support you." Watching this bizarre performance unfold, I stood rooted to the spot, a cold dread creeping up my spine. I knew Leo, vaguely. He was a shadowy figure from Sophia's past, resurrected by her nostalgic pronouncements. My childhood sweetheart, she'd called him when she reintroduced him into our lives. We grew up together, practically. Siblings. Siblings who casually dropped $40,000 on live streamers. Siblings who elicited such a dramatic shift in Sophia's behavior. Siblings who warranted a slap across my face based on a misunderstanding. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The late nights, working, the hushed phone calls, the sudden coldness that had enveloped our home. It all pointed to a betrayal so profound it stole the air from my lungs. I stood there, numb, as Sophia, oblivious or indifferent to my presence, cooed into the phone. "Darling, where are you right now?" I heard Leo mention a hotel name, a place far from our home, a place of clandestine meetings. Sophia hung up, her back to me, and turned, her eyes now devoid of any warmth, focused solely on her next destination. "I won't be home tonight," she stated, her voice flat, dismissive, as if informing a stranger of an inconsequential detail. Watching her sway out of the door, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air like a mocking reminder of the life I thought we shared. I knew with a chilling certainty that tonight stretched far beyond the immediate hours. It encompassed the coming week and weeks after that. Unceremoniously slapped, falsely accused, and now completely ignored, all for the sake of her childhood sweetheart. My heart, once a warm and hopeful organ, felt like a block of ice in my chest. Since Leo's reappearance, Sophia had become a ghost in our home. Lily, my sweet, innocent daughter, was practically invisible to her. I tried to broach the subject, to ask why she was so absent, so emotionally detached. Work was always the curt reply. You know how demanding my job is. Sophia was an online influencer, a lifestyle guru, she called herself. I knew her work was demanding, the endless live streams, the relentless promotion of products. I'd even stayed up with her countless nights in the early days, helping her build her platform. But even then, no matter how late she worked, she always came home. Always. Until Leo. My fingers gingerly touched the throbbing heat on my cheek, a physical manifestation of the emotional bruising I was enduring. My eyes burned with unshed tears. I retreated to Lily's room, seeking solace in her innocent presence. She was sitting on her bed, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, her lower lip trembling. Seeing the red mark already blooming on my face, her small hand reached out, tentatively touching the angry skin. Daddy, why did Mommy hit you? Her voice was a soft whisper, laced with confusion and fear. I forced a smile, a pathetic, strained grimace. The words, because Mommy loves you, felt like a cruel mockery in my throat. Instead, I simply stroked her soft, fluffy hair, pulling her closer. The thought of divorce, once a distant fear, now solidified into a stark, unavoidable reality. It wasn't a sudden impulse. The seed had been planted the moment Leo walked back into our lives. From that moment onwards, Sophia had become a stranger. Her nights away from home were becoming the norm. Lily barely saw her, and when she did, it was a fleeting, distracted encounter. The last time Sophia had been home for Lily's birthday, she'd arrived at 2 in the morning, hours after Lily's bedtime, hours after the candles had been blown out and the cake had been eaten. Lily had waited for her, though, my brave little girl, patiently dozing off in my arms, her eyes fixed on the door. When Sophia had finally appeared, weary and detached, I'd met her at the door, my heart heavy with unspoken accusations. I'd said nothing, just looked at her, a silent plea for an explanation. Her response, devoid of remorse, devoid of any maternal warmth, had been a chillingly casual. You know how busy I am with work. Busy. Yes, she was busy. Busy with Leo. Busy with her affair. Busy building a life that excluded us, a life built on lies and deceit. I wasn't a fool. I wasn't blind. I might not be glued to social media, but I made an effort to understand Sophia's world, her live streaming world. I'd watched her videos, seen her interactions with her followers. Busy was just a convenient excuse, a carefully constructed lie to mask her true priorities. She wasn't too busy to spend hours on live streams, meticulously crafting her online persona. She was just busy with someone else. I was tired. Tired of the excuses, tired of the neglect, tired of the constant ache of disappointment. I was done. But the next day, despite the chasm that had opened up between us, despite the icy silence that had settled in our home, Sophia texted me, a curt, demanding message. Lunch. Studio. Noon. Old habits die hard, I supposed. Early in her career, when she was just starting out, we'd made a pact. Rain or shine, I would bring her lunch to her studio every day. It was a small gesture, a tangible expression of my support, a way to connect amidst the growing demands of her online life. Even now, with my heart fractured and my trust shattered, I found myself preparing her lunch. Perhaps it was inertia, a reluctance to break the routine, or perhaps a sliver of foolish hope that clung to the remnants of our past. Arriving at the studio, my resolve was firm. This would be the last time. I would deliver the lunch, a final act of obligation, and then I would walk away. But what I witnessed when I entered the studio stopped me dead in my tracks. Sophia was live streaming, and beside her, beaming into the camera, was Leo. $40,000 to a streamer? What utter nonsense. You must have misread something, Sophia was saying, her voice laced with practiced indignation, responding to comments flashing across the screen. Leo would never do something like that, she continued, her tone dripping with faux outrage. Leo, beside her, feigned shock, his eyes wide with exaggerated innocence. Live streamers. Don't be ridiculous. I would never. You're spreading false rumors. He leaned in, placing a possessive kiss on Sophia's cheek. My wife is right here, after all. Wouldn't want to make her jealous, would we? Sophia giggled, a sound that grated on my nerves, then turned back to the camera, her eyes welling up with manufactured tears. It was my ex-husband, actually, she confessed, her voice trembling just so. I haven't canceled the linked payment on my account yet. Foolish me. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, a picture of wounded innocence. He used my money to tip those girls, even though we're divorced now. Can you believe the audacity? The chat exploded with sympathetic comments, showering Sophia with digital ennui and outrage directed at the phantom ex-husband. And there I stood, in the doorway, lunch bag in hand, the reality of her betrayal hitting me with the force of a physical blow. Ex-husband. That's who I was now, relegated to the past tense, a convenient scapegoat in her carefully constructed narrative. The air in the studio felt thick, suffocating. I stepped forward, each footfall heavy with resignation, moving into her line of sight, letting her see me, forcing her to acknowledge the real, living ex-husband she was so casually dismissing. Sophia's eyes widened, her carefully crafted composure faltering. Leo, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, continued to smile insincerely at the camera. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of panic in Sophia's gaze, a ghost of the woman I once knew, a hint of concern. It was quickly masked, replaced by a practiced blankness. Foolishly, pathetically, I'd hoped. Hoped for what? An apology? An admission of guilt? Some semblance of remorse? But Sophia was too far gone, lost in her own self-deception, consumed by her carefully curated online persona and the intoxicating allure of Leo. I placed the lunch bag on a nearby table, the plastic container thudding softly in the suddenly silent studio. Without a word, without a glance back at the woman who was once my wife, I turned and walked away. As I reached the doorway, a hand snaked out and grabbed my arm. Sophia. She was breathless, her chest heaving, as if she'd run to catch me. For a heartbeat, a foolish, desperate hope flickered within me. Maybe, just maybe. You heard, she gasped, her eyes searching mine. I remained silent, my gaze fixed on her hand gripping my arm, the hand that had once held mine with such tenderness, now cold and clammy. She hesitated, then continued, her voice regaining its practiced smoothness, the practiced performance resuming. It's just for work, Ethan. Leo can't have any negative press right now, you understand. So you want me to take the blame for him? I finished for her, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The absurdity of it all, the sheer audacity of her request, struck me as darkly comical. I let out a short, bitter laugh. So you want me to play the fool again, Sophia? For you? For him? I gently but firmly disengaged her hand from my arm, the physical contact breaking whatever fragile connection might have remained. No, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. No more. I walked out, leaving her standing there, framed in the studio doorway, her face a mask of bewildered anger. Behind me, I heard the sharp, frustrated stamp of her foot, echoing in the sudden silence. Ethan, I shouldn't have even bothered with you. Back in my car, the weight of it all crashed down on me. The betrayal, the humiliation, the casual cruelty, it was overwhelming. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to regain control, trying to quell the rising tide of despair. Just then, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Leo. See? You'll never be good enough for her, will you? The message flashed across the screen, a smug, taunting jab, twisting the knife already buried deep in my heart. Rage, raw and visceral, surged through me. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I slammed my fist against the dashboard, the sudden impact a poor substitute for the violence that threatened to erupt within me. He's right, a voice whispered in my head, cold and insidious. He's always been right. She always chooses him. A bitter, self-deprecating chuckle escaped my lips. I was a pathetic fool, begging for scraps of affection, a clown in her carefully constructed drama. With trembling hands, I started the engine, the roar of the car a momentary distraction from the turmoil inside. As I drove, my mind raced, searching for an escape, a way out of this suffocating misery. And then, an idea, dark and desperate, began to form. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking as I typed into my phone's search engine, divorce process. The next day, when I went to pick Lily up from school, the teacher greeted me with a puzzled expression. Mr. Chun? But Lily's already been picked up by Mrs. Chun earlier this morning. Sophia? Picking up Lily? It was unheard of. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I checked the security cameras at home, scrolling through the footage from earlier that day. No sign of Sophia or Lily. My unease morphed into a cold, creeping fear. A chilling premonition settled over me. I knew, instinctively, where Sophia had taken her. Driving to Sophia's studio, my heart hammered against my ribs. As I approached, I saw it, The familiar mobile livestream setup parked outside, the telltale glow of studio. Lights filtering through the windows. And inside, through the glass, I saw them. Sophia, radiant in front of the camera, and Lily, pale and subdued, standing beside her. My blood ran cold. Sophia hadn't given up on exploiting Lily for her own gain. The promise I thought I'd extracted from her, months ago, the agreement that Lily would be kept out of her exploitative online world, it was all meaningless. My fists clenched, my body trembling with a suppressed fury. I remembered the countless times Sophia had floated the idea of featuring Lily in her live streams, showcasing child-friendly products, pushing merchandise on her innocent image. I'd always refused vehemently. I'd researched the products she wanted to promote. Cheap, mass-produced skincare items, laden with chemicals, completely unsuitable for a child's delicate skin. I'd fought her tooth and nail, and finally, I thought I'd won. But here they were. Sophia, relentlessly hawking those very same products, oblivious to, or perhaps deliberately ignoring, Lily's increasingly distressed state. Through the camera lens, I could see Lily fidgeting, scratching at her arms, her small face flushed and blotchy. She was clearly uncomfortable, her skin reacting to the harsh chemicals Sophia was so enthusiastically promoting. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't watch any longer. I couldn't stand by and let Sophia use our daughter, endanger her health, all for the sake of a few fleeting moments of online fame and a handful of ill-gotten dollars. I stormed into the studio, bursting through the doors, interrupting Sophia's practiced spiel, ignoring the startled gasps and confused murmurs from the small studio audience, ignoring the thousands of anonymous faces watching online. All that mattered was Lily. I reached for Lily, pulling her gently towards me. As she saw me, her eyes welled up with tears, her small voice trembling. "Daddy, it hurts." The word hurts was a physical blow to my chest. My daughter, my precious Lily, was suffering, and her own mother was completely indifferent. I scooped her into my arms, cradling her close, my heart aching with a fierce, protective love. "It's all right, sweetheart," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. "Daddy's here now." I turned to leave, to get Lily out of this toxic environment, but Sophia blocked my path, her face contorted with a mixture of anger and feigned indignation. "Ethan, what do you think you're doing?" she hissed, her voice sharp and accusatory, completely abandoning her carefully constructed online persona. "Don't forget, we're divorced now. Lily is with me." "Divorced?" I scoffed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what you're telling everyone now?" She gestured dismissively at Lily's red, blotchy skin. "Children's skin is just sensitive, Ethan. It'll calm down in a bit. Don't be so dramatic." "Sensitive?" I repeated, my voice rising with incredulous anger. "This isn't sensitivity, Sophia. This is an allergic reaction. You're poisoning our daughter with your cheap garbage." I pulled out our marriage certificate, the official document that legally bound us, the symbol of the vows she'd so casually broken, and thrust it into the camera's view. "Divorced? Then what's this, Sophia?" A figment of my imagination. The studio fell silent. Sophia's face paled, her eyes wide with panic as she saw our wedding photo displayed on the small screen, a relic of a happier time, a stark contrast to the ugly reality of our present. "We're not divorced, Sophia," I continued, my voice ringing with righteous anger. "And you're willing to sacrifice our daughter's health for your own selfish greed. You're selling this poison to innocent people, knowing it's harmful. Have you lost your mind? Have you lost your soul?" "And no, it's not," Sophia stammered, her carefully constructed facade crumbling, her eyes darting between me and the unforgiving eye of the camera. Then, as if sensing a shift in the power dynamic, a change in the online audience's perception, her expression hardened, regaining a semblance of her practiced composure. She saw Leo approaching from the side, a smug confidence radiating from him. Her gaze locked onto his, and a new resolve seemed to solidify within her. "Ethan, don't think for a moment that this changes anything, that you can manipulate me into taking you back," she declared, her voice regaining its icy edge. "I know what you're doing. This is just another pathetic attempt to win me back. Well, let me tell you, you're dreaming. And as for that streamer money, I'm willing to overlook it. But you're not going to ruin my live stream for everyone watching." Leo reached her side, placing a possessive arm around her shoulders, his eyes narrowed, assessing me with open hostility. "So you're Sophia's ex?" he drawled, emphasizing the word ex with a deliberate sneer. He squeezed Sophia's shoulder reassuringly, then stepped in front of her, directly facing me, blocking my path. I instinctively shielded Lily further behind me, my protective instincts surging. "Now I am," I stated, my voice cold and unwavering. Sophia blinked, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the neatly folded divorce papers, the documents I'd prepared in the desperate hours after Sophia's callous dismissal the previous night. I held them out to her, my gaze unwavering. Sophia, since you seem so enamored with Leo, so eager to embrace this new chapter, let's make it official. Let's get divorced. I tightened my hold on Lily, her small body trembling against mine. You are not fit to be a wife, Sophia, I said, my voice laced with contempt. And you are certainly not fit to be a mother. Sophia's face drained of color, her eyes wide and lost, staring at the divorce papers in my hand as if they were venomous snakes. Her carefully constructed world, her online fantasy, seemed to be crumbling around her. Her lips parted, forming a silent no, a desperate denial of the reality I was presenting. She glanced at Lily, then back at me, a flicker of something akin to regret, or perhaps just fear, crossing her features. For a fleeting moment, I thought she might actually reconsider, might actually see the devastation she was causing, the irreparable damage she was inflicting on our family. But then, Leo spoke, his voice cutting through the tense silence, shattering any fragile hope that might have lingered. Don't think you can pull this stunt and fool anyone, he sneered, his eyes gleaming with a malicious amusement. A cold dread washed over me, a premonition of something sinister lurking beneath his arrogant facade. He turned to face the camera, his smile widening into a predatory grin. Folks, don't be fooled by this sob story, he announced, his voice dripping with false sincerity. This guy is just putting on an act to get his hands on Sophia's money. A calculated lie, designed to manipulate the online mob, to twist the narrative, to paint me as the villain. And I knew, with a sinking heart, that it would work. If you don't believe me, Leo continued, his voice rising with theatrical indignation, go back and watch Sophia's old live streams. This guy is always lurking in the background, threatening her, controlling her. She has to live stream 10 hours a day, or he withholds food. He's abusive. He's a monster. A wave of shock washed over me, followed by a sickening understanding of Leo's manipulative tactics. He was weaponizing Sophia's online platform against me, turning her followers into a lynch mob, fueled by lies and innuendo. And it worked instantly. The chat exploded with angry comments, accusations, and insults. Wait, I recognize him. He has been in her live streams before. Wow, I can't believe we were almost feeling sorry for him. Men are all the same. Except for Leo, of course. Reading the venomous comments scrolling across the screen, the sheer, unadulterated hatred directed at me, I felt a strange detachment, a sense of surreal disbelief. This was the world Sophia had created, the world she valued above everything else. A world built on superficiality, fueled by manufactured outrage, and easily manipulated by lies. I didn't bother to defend myself. What was the point? Arguing with a mob, fueled by misinformation and manipulated by a master liar like Leo, was a futile exercise. Instead, I focused on Sophia. My gaze locked onto hers, searching for a flicker of recognition, a spark of the woman I once knew. 7 years. 7 years of marriage. Of shared dreams, of building a life together. Did any of that mean anything to her anymore? Did she remember the vows we'd exchanged, the promises we'd made? Would she stand by me, even now, even against the rising tide of online hatred? Would she choose our shared past, our daughter's well-being, over the fleeting validation of her online followers and the manipulative charm of Leo? She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, then glanced at Leo, who stood beside her, radiating smug confidence. Finally, she closed her eyes for a brief moment, a silent, agonizing internal battle playing out behind her carefully painted eyelids. And then, she opened them again, her gaze settling on Leo, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in her expression. Leo, please, don't, she murmured, her voice barely audible above the online cacophony. My heart leaped, a foolish, desperate flicker of hope igniting in my chest. Was this it? Was she finally seeing? Leo frowned, his eyebrows furrowing in annoyance, ready to retort, to dismiss her hesitant plea. But Sophia cut him off, her voice gaining strength, her gaze now fixed on me, cold and resolute. Leo is right, darling, she said, the word darling, now sounding like a cruel mockery. He's just trying to cause trouble. Don't waste your breath on him. My heart plummeted, crashing from the brief heights of hope to the crushing depths of despair. She wasn't choosing me. She was choosing him. She was choosing her online persona, her fabricated reality, over the truth, over our past, over our daughter. She was choosing Leo. She didn't look at me again. Instead, She turned back to the camera, her voice regaining its practiced cheerfulness, addressing her online audience. All right, everyone, we've just been alerted to a potential issue with the funding for this skincare line. We're going to pause sales for now and investigate. If you've already placed an order, you can request a refund. Leo stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief, his carefully constructed plan momentarily derailed. I knew why she'd done it. She'd seen Lily's rash, the angry red welts spreading across her delicate skin. A flicker of maternal instinct, a tiny spark of conscience, had managed to break through the layers of selfishness and ambition. But it was too little, too late. I turned and walked away, Lily cradled securely in my arms, leaving Sophia standing there, surrounded by her online world and her manipulative lover. Leo sputtered something behind me, but Sophia silenced him with a dismissive wave of her hand. Let him go, darling, she said, her voice laced with a dismissive indifference. He's not worth our time. The online audience erupted in praise for her generosity, her grace in the face of my supposed abuse. I didn't hear any of it. My world had shrunk to the small, trembling body in my arms, the urgent need to get Lily to safety, to undo the damage Sophia had inflicted. We went straight to the hospital. The doctor's diagnosis was stark and terrifying: severe allergic reaction. If you'd waited even a few more hours, he said, his voice grave, she could have developed respiratory distress. It could have been fatal. Looking at Lily's pale, fragile face, her small body hooked up to monitors, the reality of Sophia's negligence, her utter disregard for our daughter's well-being, hit me with full force. Grief, sharp and agonizing, washed over me. Grief for the woman Sophia once was, the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd believed in. Grief for the future we'd lost, the family that had been shattered by her ambition and her betrayal. Grief for Lily, for the innocent child caught in the crossfire of her mother's self-destruction. Her mother, the woman who prioritized online fame and fleeting validation over her own daughter's life. The woman who was too busy to come home for Lily's birthday, yet had all the time in the world for live streams and clandestine rendezvous. The woman whose love, once a warm and comforting presence, had become a cold, hollow facade. The memories of our early days together, the years before the lure of online fame and the return of Leo, flashed through my mind. When we first got married, Sophia had been passionate about her work, driven to succeed, but grounded, compassionate. I'd supported her wholeheartedly, helping her build her online presence from scratch, from 0 viewers to thousands. I'd been proud of her ambition, her determination. Then Lily was born, and for a brief, precious year, everything changed. Sophia had put her career on hold, embracing motherhood with a tenderness and devotion that had filled our home with joy. It was the happiest year of our lives. But then Leo returned, and Sophia, seduced by his empty promises of empowerment and self-discovery, had started to change. Her ambition morphed into ruthless greed. Her online persona became more important than her real life. She started cutting corners, selling inferior products, exploiting her followers' trust for profit. I tried to reason with her, to remind her of her values, her initial ideals. She dismissed my concerns, scoffing at my naivety. This is business, Ethan, she'd said, her eyes cold and distant. You have to be ruthless to get ahead. These people are just consumers. They'll buy anything you sell them. And if they get ripped off, well, that's their problem. That was the moment I knew. The moment I realized that the Sophia I loved was gone, replaced by this hollow, self-absorbed shell. But even then, a stubborn hope had lingered within me, a foolish belief that we could somehow find our way back to each other. Until she started staying out all night. Until she became indifferent to Lily's needs. Until she slapped me across the face in front of our daughter. Until she chose Leo, publicly and unequivocally, over me and over our child. The hope finally died, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I had to get out. I had to protect Lily. I had to leave Sophia and her toxic world behind. But she wouldn't let me go easily. I knew that. Divorce, for Sophia, would be a public relations disaster. It would damage her carefully crafted image, her perfect life facade. She would fight me tooth and nail. So, I decided to disappear. To vanish from her life, to create a clean break, to protect Lily and myself from her manipulative grasp. I needed to stage my own exit, to make her believe I was gone, permanently. Fate, it seemed, had a dark sense of humor. The next day, a news report flashed across the television screen in the hospital waiting room. An unidentified body had been found in the river, not far from our home. A man, no identification. I watched the grainy images, the brief description of the victim's physical characteristics. They were disturbingly similar to my own. No one had claimed the body yet. Today was day one of my new life. Day one of freedom from Sophia. Day one of protecting Lily from her mother's destructive influence. Sophia, I knew, would be expecting me to come crawling back. She'd confidently declared, "He'll be back in 3 days, you'll see." She'd probably already placed bets with Leo, gloating over her imagined victory. But her phone calls would go unanswered. Her messages would remain unread. My old life was over, and so was my old phone. It was currently residing at the bottom of that river, a silent testament to my fabricated demise. I transferred all my data to a new phone, a burner, untraceable. Through the security cameras at home, I could still monitor the house, a detached observer of the life I'd left behind. Perhaps, in some twisted corner of her heart, Sophia felt a flicker of guilt, a pang of remorse for her treatment of us. Because today, to my surprise, she returned home early. I watched her on the camera feed, her face alight with an almost childlike excitement. She seemed to be planning a surprise, a grand gesture, perhaps to win me back, to prove her prediction right. But she arrived to an empty house. Silence greeted her, a stark contrast to the imagined welcome she'd clearly anticipated. She searched the house, calling out my name, Lily's name, her initial excitement slowly fading, replaced by confusion, then a growing unease. Finally, she gave in to her frustration and picked up the phone, dialing my number. Of course, no one answered. She tried again and again, her calls echoing unanswered in the empty house. Frustration morphed into anger, then a flicker of fear. She switched on the television, seeking distraction, seeking answers in the flickering images on the screen. And then, she saw it. The news report. The unidentified body in the river. She watched it for a moment, her brow furrowed, then dismissed it with a wave of her hand, dialing my number. Again, her anger returning, her arrogance unwavering. She left the house, slamming the door behind her, still convinced that I would be back, still blinded by her own self-importance. The next day, the same routine. She returned home early, her expression expectant, only to find the house still empty, still silent. The reality of our absence, the chilling finality of it, seemed to be slowly dawning on her. She called the kindergarten, her voice laced with forced cheerfulness, inquiring about Lily. The teacher's polite but firm response, Lily had been withdrawn from school, seemed to shatter her carefully constructed denial. Panic flickered in her eyes. She fumbled with her phone, frantically tapping the screen, desperately trying to reach me, her unanswered calls now a source of growing terror. Then, her eyes fell on the television again. The same news report, replaying on a loop. This time, something shifted. The dismissive wave of her hand faltered. Her gaze lingered on the grainy image of the unidentified body. Recognition dawned, slow and agonizing. She stared at the screen, her face draining of color, her breath catching in her throat. She recognized the description. The build, the height, the details. Details only someone who knew me intimately would notice. She stumbled out of the house, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. I knew where she was going. To the police station. Desperate for answers. Desperate to deny the horrifying truth that was beginning to take root in her mind. But there would be no answers. Not the answers she wanted, anyway. The body remained unidentified. The investigation stalled. And Sophia returned home late that night, a ghost of her former self, her face pale and hollow, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. She wandered through the empty house, a broken, lost figure, muttering to herself, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not you, is it? It can't be." Then, the dam broke. She collapsed onto the floor, burying her face in her hands, her body racked with sobs, a raw, animalistic sound of grief and regret. Too late. On the third day, she was a shell of a woman, her movements sluggish, her eyes vacant. She stumbled around the house like a sleepwalker, her mind clearly unraveling. She found the liquor cabinet, a place she'd always forbidden me to touch, and pulled out several bottles of wine, uncorking them with trembling hands. A strange irony. She, the teetotaler, the health-conscious influencer, was now drowning her sorrows in alcohol, seeking oblivion in the numbing embrace of wine. She drank, and drank, and drank, pacing the empty rooms, her eyes fixed on some unseen point in the distance, her voice a slurred whisper. "Ethan, I miss you." In the dead of night, the shrill ring of her phone shattered the silence. It was Leo. His name flashed across the screen, a beacon of false comfort, a reminder of the destructive path she'd chosen. She answered it, her voice thick with alcohol and tears, falling back into the familiar pattern, the comforting delusion. But this time, the illusion of comfort was thinner, more transparent. This was her reality now, A reality built on lies, regrets, and the crushing weight of loss. A reality she had created herself. And there was no escape. It was time to end this. The police called. Sophia was looking for me. She had gone to the police station, distraught, to identify the body, only to discover it wasn't mine. The news had triggered another wave of hysteria, apparently. The police officer on the phone told me she had been crying even harder upon realizing the mistake. He described it as tears of relief. Hysterical joy, he called it. But I knew better. Sophia's tears were never genuine. She had asked the police to find me, and they had. Hence this call, filled with well-meaning but ultimately hollow platitudes about working things out and keeping families together. I scoffed inwardly. Working things out. Was that code for working out how to continue the affair? I'd left Lily in the care of a trusted friend, a precaution against Sophia trying to use our daughter as leverage, perhaps even attempting to snatch her from my parents' home. I had to face this alone. Alone, I returned to what was once our home. Pushing open the front door, the scene was drastically different from the chaotic mess of empty wine bottles I'd witnessed on the security footage 3 days prior. The apartment was spotless, meticulously clean, almost sterile. It was as if she had tidied up, preparing for my return. I knew the police had called Sophia after contacting me. She was here, waiting. I found her in the living room, slumped on the sofa in the darkness, no lights on. I didn't speak, didn't move. The silence in this once familiar space was oppressive, heavy, like the silence of a tomb. This wasn't my home anymore. It was a mausoleum, haunted by ghosts of what we used to be. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering in from the street lamps outside, I saw a flicker of movement, a momentary glint in the darkness where she sat. Her eyes, catching the faint light, shone for a split second, like a star in the night sky. And in that fleeting moment, a memory surfaced, unbidden, vivid. The day we first met. Her eyes had been just as bright then. I'd seen her by the side of the road, crouched down in a shadowed corner, murmuring to herself. Curiosity piqued, I'd approached and found her surrounded by a litter of stray kittens, coaxing them with soft meows and offering them delicate strips of cat treats. Her eyes, then, had been just as luminous, just as full of gentle light as the kittens she was nurturing. Later, I'd started seeing her there regularly, at the same spot. I'd begun bringing my own supply of cat food and treats, drawn to the quiet kindness she radiated, and that's how we'd met, bonded over shared compassion for abandoned creatures. Ethan, the name, rasped out, hoarse and weak, pulled me back to the present, back to the darkness, back to the broken woman on the sofa. Tears welled in her eyes, reflecting the faint light like fractured diamonds. "You're back," she whispered, a statement, not a question. I simply nodded, a curt, acknowledging movement. Slowly, unsteadily, she rose to her feet and shuffled towards me. Then, with a sudden, dramatic motion, she crumpled to the floor, collapsing at my feet with a soft thud. She looked up at me, kneeling, her fragile hands reaching out, grasping desperately at my trousers. "Ethan, I was wrong," she choked out, sobs racking her thin frame. "I was blinded by Leo. I shouldn't have sided with him. I shouldn't have. Please, can you ever forgive me?" Her voice was thick with tears, pleading, desperate. I looked down at her, at those tear-filled eyes, eyes that once held such light, such promise. A wave of weariness washed over me. Faint echoes of old. Feelings of affection, of pity, stirred within me, but they were weak, insubstantial, drowned out by the deeper, colder currents of betrayal and pain. Those eyes, they were the same, and yet utterly different. The light was still there, but it was dimmed, tarnished. The innocence, the genuine warmth, had been replaced by something else, something calculating, self-serving, manipulative. She was capable of such cruelty now, such callousness. "No," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I can't." Her grip tightened, her fingers digging into the fabric of my trousers. "But what about Lily? Do you want to deprive her of her mother? She's so young, she needs me." "I regret everything, Ethan," she sobbed, her words tumbling out in a torrent of self-pity. "I swear, I'll be a better mother to her. I've cut ties with Leo, completely. I promise, he's out of my life for good. Please, Ethan, give me another chance. For Lily's sake, for our family." It was almost comical, this desperate performance. Here she was, on her knees, begging for forgiveness, appealing to my emotions, playing the victim, all while completely missing the point. A bitter laugh escaped my lips, a sound devoid of humor. "Lily," I echoed, my voice laced with sarcasm. "You dare to speak of Lily? When I was being publicly vilified, when my reputation was being dragged through the mud, She hadn't stood by me. Now that I was back, seemingly risen from the dead, now that the consequences of her actions were staring her in the face, she suddenly regretted everything. Was it love? Or was it simply the loss of control? Had she become so accustomed to having me around, so reliant on my presence, that my absence had thrown her into a panic? Was it love? Or was it mere habit? What if the body in the river had been mine? What if I had actually died? Would her remorse have been genuine? Or would it have been a fleeting performance, a brief period of mourning before she moved on, found someone else to fill the void, someone else to manipulate? No, I didn't believe her. Not for a second. Lily's birthday, I said, my voice cold, cutting through her self-serving pleas. Where were you on Lily's birthday? When Lily was struggling to breathe, her body covered in rashes, fighting for air because of your greed. Where were you then, Sophia? Her face paled, the carefully constructed mask of remorse faltering, replaced by a flicker of something closer to fear. She mumbled a weak, barely audible, "I'm sorry." Sorry is a meaningless word, Sophia, I said, my voice rising, hardening. It can't undo the damage you've done to Lily. It can't heal the wounds you've inflicted on my heart. It can't bring back the trust you so carelessly shattered. I stepped back, dislodging her clinging hands, creating a physical distance between us, mirroring the emotional gulf that had grown between us, vast and unbridgeable. Reaching into my pocket, I produced another copy of the divorce papers, crisp and final. Sign them, Sophia, I said, my voice firm, unwavering. Let's end this, once and for all. Let's go our separate ways. She shook her head, her eyes wide with desperation. No, Ethan, please. Don't do this. Let me make it up to you. Let me make amends. I'll apologize publicly, on my live stream, to everyone. I'll tell them the truth. Just, please, don't leave me. Don't leave us. I stared at her, unmoved, unyielding. Your apology means nothing to me, Sophia. It's the bare minimum you owe, not just to me, but to everyone you've deceived, everyone you've harmed. She had preyed on the trust of thousands for her own gain. It was time for her to face the consequences, to take responsibility for her actions. Not for my sake, but for the sake of justice. Sophia didn't know it, but I'd been quietly gathering evidence for weeks, months even, meticulously documenting her fraudulent practices, her deceptive marketing, her exploitation of her followers. I'd contacted victims, gathered testimonials, built an airtight case. And I was ready to use it. The lawsuit, the public exposure, the financial repercussions, it was all coming. And Sophia and Leo would face the full force of the law. Sophia, sensing my unwavering resolve, finally seemed to grasp the gravity of her situation. She saw the coldness in my eyes, the finality in my words. She realized that this wasn't a game, wasn't a manipulation tactic. This was the end. Through her tears, she looked at me, a flicker of understanding, perhaps even a glimmer of genuine remorse in her eyes. She nodded slowly, defeated. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Okay, Ethan, I'll sign them. She still wanted to bargain, to find a way out, to salvage something, anything. Can't we at least try counseling? Therapy? Anything. I cut her off, my voice sharp, final. There's nothing left to try, Sophia. Her face crumpled, her last vestiges of hope extinguished. She reached for the divorce papers, her hand trembling so violently she could barely grasp the pen. It took her several attempts to even hold it steady. As she finally signed her name, a shaky, illegible scrawl, I said, my voice devoid of warmth. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Civil Affairs Bureau. As I turned to leave, the sound of her name, a soft, desperate whimper, stopped me at the door. I glanced back. Sophia had slumped to the floor again, her body folding in on itself, collapsing in a heap of despair. Then I saw it. The unnatural pallor of her skin, the shallow, rapid breaths, the way she clutched at her chest. Something was terribly wrong. Sophia had cancer. I knew she'd always been fragile, her health precarious. The relentless demands of her live streaming career, the lack of sleep, the poor diet, the constant stress, it had taken its toll. Looking at her now, lying pale and still on the floor, the carefully constructed facade of online glamour stripped away, replaced by a stark vulnerability, I was suddenly transported back to the early days of our marriage. Before the fame, before the lies, before the betrayal. I remembered her relentless drive, her unwavering ambition, her fierce dedication to building her online empire. She'd pushed herself to the brink. Fueled by caffeine and sheer willpower, surviving on minimal sleep and even less food. She'd been so focused, so driven, so consumed by her goals. I'd worried about her, pleaded with her to slow down, to take care of herself. But she'd always brushed aside my concerns, dismissing them as weakness, as a lack of understanding of her relentless pursuit of success. My time is precious, Ethan, she'd say, her voice tight with tension. I have to seize every opportunity. I have to build my brand. I have to make it. Helplessly, I'd watched her burn herself out, day after day, night after night, sacrificing her health, her well-being, for the fleeting promise of online fame. After we got married, we'd taken in the stray cat she'd been feeding, bringing it home to live with us. Every evening, no matter how late she worked, Sophia would spend time with the cat, stroking its fur, talking to it in soft, soothing tones, finding a moment of peace in the midst of her chaotic life. The once scrawny stray had thrived under our care, becoming plump and sleek, a pampered member of our household. Sophia, on the other hand, had become increasingly gaunt, her vibrancy slowly fading, her light dimming. That's when we'd made a pact. Every day, I would bring her lunch to the studio, a small ritual, a way to ensure she ate at least one proper meal, a tangible expression of my care and concern. I'd stay with her while she ate, making sure she finished everything, a silent guardian against her self-destructive tendencies. Then Lily came along, and for a while, things changed. Motherhood had softened her, grounded her, brought a new dimension to her life. She'd gained weight, her cheeks flushed with color, her eyes sparkling with joy. But then Leo returned, and the old patterns re-emerged, amplified, distorted. The ambition turned to greed. The drive became ruthless exploitation. The fragile health crumbled under the weight of her choices. We had once been partners, allies, bound together by shared dreams, facing life's challenges as a team. Now, we were adversaries, locked in a bitter battle, inflicting wounds on each other with calculated precision. Back in the present, Sophia lay in a hospital bed, pale and weak, the harsh fluorescent lights accentuating the hollowness of her cheeks, the shadows under her eyes. Leo, the man she'd thrown everything away for, was nowhere to be seen. A stark, bleak irony. Her eyelashes fluttered, delicate as butterfly wings. She stirred, her eyelids lifting slowly, revealing eyes clouded with pain and confusion. She saw me standing beside her bed, and her eyes widened, instantly filling with tears. Before she could speak, I said, my voice flat, clinical, "You have cancer, Sophia." Her breath hitched, a sharp, ragged intake of air. Late stage, I added, the words hanging heavy in the sterile air of the hospital room. She lay there, still, silent, her skin almost translucent against the crisp white sheets, merging with the sterile whiteness of the hospital bed. No dramatic outburst, no tears, no denial, just a quiet, chilling stillness. Only the faint tremor in her jaw, the subtle clenching of her fists, betrayed the storm raging beneath the surface. "I want to see Leo," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile plea. I took her dim. Not through a sterile glass partition, not in a formal visitation room. I arranged for them to meet face to face, in a quiet, private space within the prison. They sat opposite each other, separated only by a small, worn table, the silence between them thick with unspoken words, with years of tangled emotions, with the weight of their shared mistakes. Finally, Sophia moved. Her hand flashed out, swift and unexpected, and landed with a sharp crack against Leo's cheek. It wasn't a powerful blow, her strength was diminished, but it was filled with a lifetime of pent-up rage, of betrayal, of disillusionment. She raised her hand again, and again, striking him repeatedly, each slap a silent accusation, a physical manifestation of her broken heart, her shattered dreams. Leo sat there, stunned, unmoving, taking the blows, his face reddening with each impact. Then, as if finally snapping out of his shock, he lunged forward, grabbing Sophia's wrist in a vice-like grip. A sickening snap echoed in the small room. Sophia's wrist broke. My blood ran cold. I lunged forward, ready to call for help, to intervene, but Sophia showed no reaction. No cry of pain, no flinch, no change in her detached expression. She simply stared at Leo, her face a mask of blank indifference. She seemed utterly disconnected from her own body, from the pain, from the violence being inflicted upon her. She was already gone, already beyond the reach of physical sensation, lost in some inner landscape of despair. She even let out a soft, chilling laugh, a hollow, mirthless sound. "Harder," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You can do better than that. Try again." Leo recoiled as if burned, dropping her hand, his face contorted with fear and revulsion. He scrambled away from her, stumbling backwards. As if he'd touched something contaminated, something toxic. He practically fled, darting towards me, seeking refuge, seeking protection. Standing beside me, Leo pointed at Sophia, his voice trembling, his eyes wide with terror. She's insane. She's a lunatic. She's completely lost her mind. But Sophia wasn't looking at him. She wasn't even acknowledging his presence. Her gaze was fixed on me, her eyes searching mine, a flicker of pain, of regret, of something unreadable, passing across her face. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. "Are you satisfied now? He's in prison. I'm dying of cancer. Is this your revenge, Ethan? Are you finally happy? Satisfied?" I repeated, the word hollow, empty. Happy. The questions hung in the air, unanswered, unanswerable. "You accuse me of spending 40,000 on livestream girls," I said, my voice low, steady, finally giving voice to the years of unspoken resentment, the festering anger that had been eating away at me. "You slandered me publicly, subjected me to online abuse, made me a pariah in my own community. Do you know what that felt like, Sophia? Do you understand the humiliation, the isolation, the fear? You called me your ex-husband, erased me from your life, made me a ghost in my own home. Do you know what that did to my sense of self, to my dignity? Do you have any idea how deeply you wounded me? And you dare to ask if I'm satisfied? No, Sophia, I'm not satisfied. Nothing you or Leo endure will ever truly compensate for the pain you inflicted, the damage you caused. You destroyed our family, you endangered our daughter, you poisoned our lives. No, Sophia, I will never be satisfied." Visiting time was over. As we left the prison, Sophia collapsed again, this time in the street outside, her frail body unable to bear the weight of her broken heart, her broken life. I took her back to the hospital, arranged for treatment for her broken wrist. As she lay in the hospital bed, her arm in a cast, she opened her mouth to speak, to say something, anything. But then, 2 police officers entered the room, their presence filling the sterile space with an air of official formality. They showed me their badges. "Mr. Chun," one of them said, addressing me directly. I nodded, a sense of weary resignation washing over me. "We have a report alleging your involvement in fraudulent activities," the officer continued, his voice calm but firm. "We need you to come with us to the station for questioning." It seemed I had underestimated them both. Sophia and Leo, even in their downfall, were still capable of inflicting pain, of weaving webs of deceit. At the police station, the extent of their elaborate scheme became chillingly clear. Years of fraud, meticulously documented, intricately layered, countless victims. A vast network of deceit. And somehow, they had managed to implicate me, to cast me as the mastermind, the puppet master pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Sophia. It had to be her. She had used my identity, my personal information, to register shell corporations, to launder money, to cover their tracks. A final act of betrayal, a last desperate attempt to drag me down with her. As I was led away, I saw Sophia's face, her eyes red-rimmed, her expression a complex mix of emotions, fear, regret, desperation, perhaps even a twisted sense of triumph. She tried to rise from her bed, to come with me, but her broken body betrayed her, leaving her stranded, helpless. In that moment, a chilling realization washed over me. She hadn't been begging for forgiveness. She hadn't been seeking reconciliation. She had been setting me up. Her tears, her pleas, her remorse. It had all been an act, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to manipulate me, to lull me into a false sense of security, to distract me from the trap she was setting. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. I had been a fool. Again. For even a moment. Believing in the possibility of her redemption. For allowing myself to be swayed by the echoes of the woman she once was. For underestimating the depth of her depravity. I spent days at the police station, tirelessly working to prove my innocence, to unravel the tangled web of lies and deceit they had woven. It was an uphill battle, a grueling process, demanding every ounce of my energy, my focus, my resolve. In the midst of this legal nightmare, Sophia called. Again and again. Her voice, weak and trembling, filled my voicemail with tearful apologies, desperate pleas for forgiveness. Hollow promises of change. She claimed it was all Leo's doing, that she'd been manipulated, coerced, that she'd never intentionally hurt me, never intentionally framed me. I listened to the messages, unmoved, untouched. The words were empty, meaningless. They were just more performances, more manipulations, more lies. I was done with her lies. I was done with her. I blocked her number. My focus was solely on clearing my name, on securing my freedom, on building a new life for Lily and myself, far away from the toxic remnants of our past. The police investigation revealed that Leo, predictably, had pointed the finger squarely at me, claiming that Sophia and he were merely acting under my instructions, that I was the mastermind behind the entire operation. But Leo hadn't counted on one crucial detail. He hadn't known about my other life, my hidden skills. He hadn't realized that I wasn't just a grieving husband, a cuckolded fool. I was a hacker, and hackers leave digital footprints. It took me mere hours to trace their online activities, to uncover the evidence that exonerated me and definitively implicated them. Their elaborate scheme, their carefully constructed lies, crumbled under the weight of digital truth. The trial was swift, decisive. Leo's defense crumbled under the weight of irrefutable evidence. He was found guilty on all counts. The livestream camera, ironically, captured his downfall, broadcasting his humiliation to the world, his once smug face contorted with rage and despair as the verdict was read. His carefully constructed online persona, the handsome, charming, successful influencer, was shattered, revealing the ugly reality beneath: a petty criminal, a manipulative fraud, a broken man. His nose, broken in our final confrontation, remained crooked, a permanent reminder of his public disgrace. The carefully crafted illusion of perfection was gone, replaced by a stark, unflattering reality. The online comments were brutal, merciless. The same fans who had once fawned over him, showering him with digital gifts and adulation, now turned on him with savage glee, tearing him apart with their online vitriol. How could I ever have liked this guy? He's disgusting. I can't believe I actually bought his products. My skin is still recovering from that garbage. They're perfect for each other, Sophia and Leo. Two peas in a pod, both scammers. But what about Sophia's ex-husband? He's the real victim here. He deserves justice. Justice. It was a start. Watching Leo's downfall, witnessing the public dismantling of his carefully constructed facade, there was a fleeting sense of satisfaction. But it was fleeting, ephemeral, quickly replaced by a deeper, more profound weariness. The truth was out. The lies were exposed. The perpetrators were being held accountable. But it couldn't undo the damage. It couldn't erase the pain. It couldn't bring back what we had lost. I returned to our former home, to the sterile emptiness that now defined it. Sophia was there, waiting. The divorce papers lay on the table, still unsigned on her side. She looked thinner than ever, almost skeletal, her once vibrant face gaunt and hollowed out. The weight loss, the illness, the stress, it had ravaged her, leaving her a shadow of her former self. Is there really no chance for us?" she asked, her voice weak, barely a whisper. I looked at her, my gaze steady, unwavering. "None, Sophia," I said, my voice firm, final. "Not even a sliver." Her face crumpled, all color draining from her cheeks, leaving her skin ashen, deathly pale. She seemed to shrink in on herself, disappearing into the shadows of the room, swallowed by the darkness of her own making. Her shoulders began to shake, silent sobs racking her frail body. "But, Lily," she choked out, her voice thick with tears. "I'll miss Lily so much." I cut her off, my voice sharp, unforgiving. "Did you think of Lily when you were betraying me? When you were in bed with another man? Did you think of Lily when you were pushing those toxic products on your followers, knowing they were harmful? Did you think of Lily at all, Sophia?" Her face contorted, her lips trembling, turning almost black with despair. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a broken surrender. With a trembling hand, she finally picked up the pen and signed the divorce papers, the final act of severance, the official end of our marriage, the formal declaration of our irreparable separation. As I turned to leave, to finally close this chapter of my life, Sophia's body went limp. She slid from her chair, collapsing onto the floor in a lifeless heap. Sophia had cancer. Late stage. Terminal. I remembered her fragile health, her relentless drive, her self-destructive pursuit of online fame. The years of neglect, the years of stress, the years of pushing her body to its limits, it had finally caught up with her. Looking at her now, lying unconscious on the floor, her face ashen, her breathing shallow, a wave of pity, a strange, unexpected pang of sadness washed over me. It was a ghost of old feelings, a flicker of the love I once felt for her, a faint echo of the life we once shared. In the early days of her career, when she was just starting out, she'd been so driven, so focused, so determined to succeed. She'd pushed herself relentlessly, sacrificing everything for her ambition. She'd lived on adrenaline and caffeine, fueled by a desperate need for validation, for recognition, for fame. I tried to protect her, to care for her, to pull her back from the brink. But she'd always pushed me away, rejecting my concern as weakness, as a lack of understanding of her unwavering pursuit of her dreams. After we got married, we brought the stray cat into our home, a small act of shared compassion, a tiny island of tenderness in the midst of her chaotic, driven life. Every evening, when she finally came home, exhausted but exhilarated, she would spend hours with the cat, finding solace in its quiet presence, in its unconditional affection. The stray cat, once thin and neglected, had blossomed under our care, becoming fat and spoiled, a pampered pet, a symbol of the small, fragile beauty we had managed to create amidst the chaos of our lives. Sophia, in contrast, had grown thinner, more brittle, her light fading, her vitality draining away. And so, the daily ritual of lunch deliveries had begun, a small act of care, a tangible expression of my love, a desperate attempt to keep her tethered to reality, to remind her of her own humanity. We had once been bound together, intertwined, our lives inextricably linked. Now, we were severed, broken, our connection irrevocably destroyed. We had once been lovers, partners, allies. Now, we were strangers, adversaries, our relationship reduced to ashes, to recriminations, to regret. Back in the present, Sophia lay in the hospital bed, her breathing shallow, her skin translucent. Leo, the man for whom she'd sacrificed everything, was locked away, out of reach, irrelevant. A tragic, pathetic end. Her eyelashes fluttered again, and she woke. Seeing me beside her bed, her eyes filled with tears, a desperate longing in their depths. Before she could speak, I said, the words flat, devoid of emotion, "You have cancer, Sophia. It's terminal." She lay there, still, silent, her face pale against the white pillowcase, her body fragile, fading. No reaction, no tears, no denial. Just a quiet acceptance of the inevitable. "I wanted to see Leo," she had whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile, desperate plea. And I had taken her to him. I had granted her final wish, a last act of compassion, pity, perhaps just a final attempt to understand the woman she had become. They had sat together, face to face, separated only by a worn table, the silence between them thick with unspoken words, with the weight of their shared mistakes. And then, she had struck him, again and again, a futile act of rage, a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of control in a life spiraling out of control. And now, here she was, in the hospital, fading, dying alone. Her dreams of online fame, her pursuit of wealth and validation, her destructive affair, it had all led to this. To nothing. Her eyelashes fluttered again. She woke, seeing me beside her bed, her eyes filled with tears, a desperate longing in their depths. Before she could speak, I said, the words flat, devoid of emotion, "You have cancer, Sophia. It's terminal." She lay there, still, silent, her face pale against the white pillowcase, her body fragile, fading. No reaction, no tears, no denial. Just a quiet acceptance of the inevitable. "I wanted to see Leo," she had whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile, desperate plea. And I had taken her to him. I had granted her final wish, a last act of compassion, pity, perhaps just a final attempt to understand the woman she had become. They had sat together, face to face, separated only by a worn table, the silence between them thick with unspoken words, with the weight of their shared mistakes. And then, she had struck him, again and again, a futile act of rage, a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of control in a life spiraling out of control. And now, here she was, in the hospital, fading, dying alone. Her dreams of online fame, her pursuit of wealth and validation, her destructive affair, it had all led to this. To nothing. Leo was serving a life sentence. Sophia was dying. And Lily and I, we were free. Before her trial, Leo was sentenced to death due to the severity and scale of his fraud, which included international scams. Sophia, as his accomplice, received a life sentence. Even with her terminal illness, her remaining days would be spent in prison. Before being taken into custody, Sophia, tears streaming down her face, begged me to allow Lily to see her one last time. I went to my friend's house and brought Lily home. Kneeling down, I looked into my daughter's innocent eyes. "Lily, would you like to see Mommy one last time?" Without hesitation, she shook her head, a resolute, unwavering no. I didn't ask why. A child's heart is pure, untainted by adult complexities. Children possess an innate ability to discern right from wrong, truth from falsehood. Sophia would carry that rejection, that final, silent judgment from her own daughter, with her into prison, into her final days. A fitting end to her tragic story. I felt no sympathy, no pity. That night, I dreamed of her again. It was Sophia, from a time long ago, when Lily was just a baby, barely out of infancy. We were at the beach, the three of us, the vast expanse of the ocean stretching before us, the rhythmic crash of waves a soothing lullaby. Lily was asleep in Sophia's arms, nestled against her chest, lulled into peaceful slumber by the sound of the sea. Suddenly, Sophia turned to me, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Do you know why I'm called Sophia Rain?" she asked, her voice gentle, wistful. I shook my head, curious. "My parents loved the ocean," she explained, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "They believed rain and the sea were connected, two parts of the same whole. I was born in summer, during the rainy season, so they simply named me Sophia Rain." She turned to me, her eyes searching mine. "Do you think it's a silly name? Too simple?" I shook my head again. "No," I said softly. "It's beautiful. Besides," I added, a teasing smile spreading across my face, "my name is even simpler. Ethan Chun. So plain, so ordinary." But Sophia smiled, her eyes shining. "Simple, yes," she agreed. "But, Ethan, it means strong, enduring. And Chun, it means dawn, new beginning. Simple, but full of meaning. Your parents gave you a beautiful name, Ethan, a name that promises a good life." We laughed then, a shared moment of lightness, of connection, of simple joy. Our laughter echoed across the beach, momentarily startling Lily awake in Sophia's arms. But we couldn't stop laughing, couldn't contain the happiness that welled up within us. "Then I will live in the rain," I said, my voice soft, my gaze fixed on her face. "I love the rain." Sophia didn't ask which rain I meant. Sophia Rain, or the rain from the sky. We both knew. In that moment, there was only love, pure and uncomplicated, a silent understanding that transcended words. Later that day, we chose a name for our daughter. Lily Sophia Chun. Sophia's name, Sophia's essence, woven into Lily's identity. We wanted her to be like her mother, or at least, like the Sophia I remembered, the Sophia I had loved. Kind, vibrant, full of life, full of light. "Daddy, I can't sleep," a small voice whispered, pulling me back from the depths of memory, back to the cold reality of the present. I opened my eyes. Lily stood at the bedroom door, clutching her pillow, her small face pale in the dim light of the nightlight. I got out of bed and scooped her up into my arms, carrying her back to bed, tucking her in beside me. Outside, the rain was falling, a torrential downpour, drumming against the window panes, a soothing white noise filling the room. I held Lily close, stroking her hair, whispering soft reassurances, until finally, lulled by the rhythm of the rain, she drifted back to sleep, her breathing soft and even against my chest. The sound of rain. It could soothe the soul, wash away the pain, bring a sense of peace, of cleansing. Once, Sophia had been like that rain, a source of comfort, of solace, of renewal. But that was a lifetime ago. That was another Sophia, another life. A few days later, the prison called. Sophia had died in her cell, succumbing to the cancer, finally succumbing to the weight of her own choices. She hadn't even made it through the rainy season. Her parents and I arranged her burial. The day of the funeral, the heavens opened, unleashing a torrential downpour, a relentless deluge of rain. It was as if the sky itself was weeping, mourning the loss of Sophia Rain, or perhaps, as if the heavens were scolding her, raining down their disapproval, their judgment. Sophia Rain, what foolishness you wrought, that even the skies weep in sorrow. In life, she had sought forgiveness, craved redemption, begged for my absolution. But from the moment she had slandered me, betrayed me, destroyed our trust, I knew, deep down, that our connection was irrevocably broken. There was no turning back. There was no forgiveness to be given. I took Lily to Sophia's grave. My daughter clung to me tightly, burying her face in my coat, her small body trembling. "Mommy was bad," she whispered, her voice muffled against my chest. "Yes, Lily, Mommy was bad. Even in death, all you remember is the bad. But it doesn't matter now, Sophia. You're gone. And Lily and I, we are still here. We are still alive. And we will have a new beginning. We will have a new dawn. We will have a new Ethan, a new life. And Lily, my sweet, innocent Lily, will have a new Chun, a new future. A future without you. A future filled with light, with hope, with the promise of a new beginning. A new life. A new dawn."